Have you ever seen a place that still has the skeleton of a big city but lives like a small town? That's the feeling you get in parts of Michigan, infrastructure built for its golden era, but today it has to strain month after month just to keep running. In this video, I'm taking you through 10 collapsed places, each with a totally different signature. Some fell when industry shut off. Some cracked when people lost trust in the system. Some sit inside a shocking rich-poor contrast just blocks apart. And some look beautifully preserved, but the population is paper-thin. You'll start to notice a pattern. Once the population drops far enough, everything begins to fall like dominoes. And the scariest part is, it can happen almost anywhere. Number 10. Saginaw in this town has a very specific kind of collapse. It is not the loud, overnight kind. It is the slow kind where the city still looks big, but it does not feel filled in anymore. Saginaw used to be sized for a crowd. Back in 1900, it had about 42,300 people. By 1960, it hit about 198,200. That is a boom you can still see in the street grid. The old brick buildings, the wide roads, the "we built this for the future" attitude. But here is the gut punch. By 2010, it was down to about 51,500. That is roughly a 74% drop from the peak. By 2020, it fell again to about 44,200. In plain English, the city kept the bones of a 200,000 person place, but it is trying to live with around 40-something thousand people now. And when you drive it, you feel that mismatch immediately. You will get a block where one house is lit up, somebody's car is in the driveway, life is happening. Then the next 2 or 3 lots are just gone. Grass, trees, a random sidewalk to nowhere. The city has been described as having about 25% of its land sitting vacant. In 2010 alone, there were about 5,500 properties listed as vacant or abandoned. That is not a rough patch. That is a different version of a city. Saginaw's signature is the green zone. About 350 acres where the emptiness is so heavy it stops being a housing problem and starts being a city management problem. Around 72% of the land in that area was described as vacant or abandoned, and the talk was that most parcels could end up that way if nothing changed. When a neighborhood gets that thin, you are not debating coffee shops. You are debating whether it makes sense to keep maintaining streets, water lines, and sewer lines for blocks that barely have people on them, because the bill does not shrink when the population does. Saginaw has around 300 miles of sewer pipes in the system, and in places like the Green Zone, some water lines are more than 80 years old. Some were even described as wooden. That is the kind of detail that makes you pause. You can almost hear the city creaking. To be fair, Saginaw is not completely tapped out. There are still anchors. There is a health services corridor. There are major employers like Covenant Healthcare and Nextier. Downtown has had bright spots like a restored restaurant and older buildings turned into apartments. But it feels like islands of okay in a sea of used to be. So here is the future if the trend stays the trend. Saginaw keeps shrinking into clusters. The working parts keep working. The thinnest parts keep turning back into open space. If Saginaw wants to pull itself out of that slow collapse, it has to stop pretending every block is coming back. It has to right-size its infrastructure to the population it actually has, not the population it remembers. It has to clear and reuse vacant land on purpose, not by accident. And it has to grow from the anchors outward, one corridor at a time, instead of spreading hope evenly across a map that no longer matches reality. Number 9. Muskegon Heights. And this one hits different because it didn't just lose factories or jobs. It lost something towns usually cling to like a life raft: its public schools. First, the size of the fall. Back in 1960, Muskegon Heights had about 19,552 people. By 2020, it was down to 9,917. That is basically losing about half the town, roughly a 49% drop. And what makes it feel even sharper is how small the city is. Muskegon Heights is only about 3.185 square miles, So when people leave, you do not need statistics to notice it. You feel it in minutes. Here is the weird part. You are not out in the middle of nowhere. You are near a Lake Michigan region that can look lively, refreshed, even tourist-friendly in places. Then you cross into Muskegon Heights and the vibe changes fast. Streets feel quiet in a way that is not peaceful. It is more like the town is holding its breath. You will see blocks where one house is clearly lived in, then the next property looks like it has been sitting still for years. Some buildings have that used to matter look, the kind you can picture in old photos, except now the parking lots feel too big for the number of cars that show up. Now let's talk about the signature twist, the part that makes this town unforgettable. Muskegon Heights became known for a move that sounds like a movie plot, but it really happened. Around 2012, the school district hit a financial wall so hard that the solution wasn't a small budget cut. The district went under emergency management, and the public school system was basically rebuilt into a charter model just to keep the lights on. People remember that moment because it wasn't just about classrooms. It was a town admitting out loud, we cannot run this the normal way anymore. And the stress did not just disappear. Years later, the district was still being talked about with over $30 million in debt, before getting released from receivership in 2021, and then seeing reports of major debt forgiveness around 2023. That is a long time for a community to live inside a crisis headline. Muskegon Heights is what collapse looks like when it gets personal. When a town's population shrinks, money shrinks. And when the school system becomes the battleground, families make decisions fast. They either leave or they stay and carry it. That is why this place doesn't feel like it is down. It feels like it is trying to survive in a body that has been getting lighter every decade. 8. Benton Harbor. And this town has one of the craziest, how is this even possible? Signatures on the whole list. You can cross one river and feel like you just switched countries. On paper, Benton Harbor should be a lakefront winner. It sits right by Lake Michigan, it has that breezy vacation energy, and it's literally next door to St. Joseph. But here's the gut check. Benton Harbor peaked around 19,100 people in 1960. By 2020, it was down to 9,103. That's a drop of about 52%. Imagine a town losing more than half its neighbors and still having to maintain the streets, utilities, and basic services that were built for the old version of itself. And the day-to-day numbers match the feeling. In 2023, the poverty rate sits around 41.9%. That's not a few struggling families. That's almost half the town carrying the weight. Then zoom out to the county and you get this stuck-in-the-middle employment picture. About 5.5% unemployment in August 2025, then around 4.7% in November 2025. It's not a total free fall, but it's enough of a grind that people keep looking elsewhere for stability. Now here's where Benton Harbor turns into a retention trap, because the contradictions get sharper the longer you stare. Whirlpool's world headquarters is in Benton Harbor. Let that sit for a second. A global corporate name on one side of the story, and on the other side, blocks that feel like they've been waiting years for the next wave of investment to actually reach them. And nothing hits harder than the water story. Benton Harbor's water system exceeded the lead action level for 3 consecutive years. That's the kind of headline that doesn't just scare people, it erodes trust. The state response included big dollars. About $35 million identified for water infrastructure needs, plus roughly $18.6 million for replacing lead service lines. But money doesn't instantly rebuild confidence. You can fix pipes faster than you can fix the feeling that your own home might not be safe. That's Benton Harbor's collapse. Not one explosion, but a constant whiplash between this place should be thriving and why does it still feel left behind? And the question hanging over it is simple. Will the future investment finally flow into the neighborhoods, or will it keep stopping at the river? Number 7. River Rouge. Here's the signature. River Rouge is tiny, but a huge part of its identity is basically an industrial no-go zone. The city is only about 3.25 square miles, and sitting inside its borders is Zug Island, an industrial steel island that's about 0.93 square miles and has 0 residents. So when you look at the map, you realize something wild. A big slice of the city isn't a neighborhood at all. It's rail lines, smokestacks, docks, and the kind of heavy industry most people only see in documentaries. Now the collapse part. River Rouge peaked around 20,549 people back in the 1950s. By 2020, it was down to about 7,224. That's roughly a 65% population loss. In other words, the town kept a massive industrial footprint, but the people who used to fill in the blocks around it just kept disappearing. And the numbers today match that feeling of being squeezed. The median household income sits around $32,568, 2019 to 2023. That's not comfortable factory town money. That's tight budget, every bill matters money. Zoom out to the local job climate, and Wayne County's unemployment rate tells the same story of instability. About 5.3% in August 2025, then 6.2% in November 2025. Not the end of the world, but enough to keep a place like this from feeling steady, especially when so many families are already living close to the edge. Now, picture the drive. You roll through residential streets that feel quiet in a way that isn't charming. Low houses, older blocks, the kind of places where you can tell there used to be more kids, more cars, more noise. Then you hit the water and everything changes. The river is there, the cranes are there, the industrial lights glow like a different city across the fence line. It's this weird contrast where something is clearly still operating, still producing, still moving, but it's not feeding everyday life the way it used to. And if you want a little only in this area twist, River Rouge has even been tied into the legend of the Windsor Hum, that mysterious low rumble people reported across the river where Zug Island was once suspected as a possible source. Whether you buy the story or not, it fits the vibe. A city living next to a machine so big it feels like it has its own gravity. River Rouge is what collapse looks like when the industry stays, but the town around it can't hold on to its people. The big question is, does River Rouge ever become a real community again, or does it keep shrinking until it's basically just a few surviving blocks next to an island of steel? Number 6. E-Course. If you only see E-Course from the water, you'd think it's doing fine. You've got the Detroit River on one side, big lake freighters sliding past like moving apartment buildings, and a riverfront park where people show up every year for a 4th of July fireworks show. It's the kind of scene that looks like a postcard. But here's the gut punch. This is a town that can look peaceful at sunset and still be broke by the end of the month. In April 2025, local reporting said E-Course could literally run out of cash after years of a shrinking tax base and old debt that never stopped chasing it. And the story behind that is pure downriver. E-Course grew into an industrial muscle town, especially after a 1923 rolling mill helped make it a real supplier for the auto world. A few years later, steel got even bigger here, and the city built its identity around that heavy industry heartbeat. Then the heartbeat started skipping. In December 2019, U.S., Steel said it would indefinitely idle a significant portion of its Great Lakes Works operation in E-Course, with layoff notices that could hit up to 1,550 workers. That's the kind of number that doesn't just hurt, it changes the mood of an entire place overnight. Now look at the long arc. In 1950, E-Course had 17,950 people, basically about 18,000. By 2020, it was 9,305. That's a loss of roughly 48%, almost half the town gone, and the more recent estimate puts it at 8,900 people, so it's not exactly roaring back. Money feels tight here too. The median household income is $45,000, 2019 to 2023. And even if you zoom out to the wider job climate, it still reads shaky. Wayne County unemployment was 5.3% in August 2025, then 6.2% in November 2025. Those aren't just stats. That's rent stress. That's maybe next month living. And of course has a scar that tells you this isn't a new drama. It went bankrupt in 1986 and didn't get out of receivership until 1990. So when people say, why can't the city just fix it? The answer is, it's been trying to climb out of a hole for decades. So here's the question that hangs over E-Course. With the riverfront still showing life, does this place find a real second act? Or does it keep shrinking until the fireworks are the busiest thing that happens all the year? Number 5. Pontiac is a town that once built something way too big for the life it has now, and then watched that symbol get wiped off the map. If you grew up anywhere near Detroit, you've heard of the Pontiac Silverdome. This place used to host the Detroit Lions and big events that made the city feel like it was part of the major leagues. And then the story flipped. The Silverdome shut down, got passed around, and eventually got torn apart. The demolition ran from December 2017 to March 2018. A stadium that used to scream on Sundays ended as a pile of rubble and dust. That is Pontiac in one picture: oversized ambition, then a long, quiet unwind. Now look at the people numbers. Pontiac hit its peak in 1970 with 85,280 residents. By 2020, it was 61,600. That's a loss of roughly 27 to 28%, more than 1/4 of the city gone. And here's the tricky part. From 2010 to 2020, it actually ticked up a little. So Pontiac isn't a pure everybody fled story. It's more like the city is still here, but the foundation under it has been shaky for a long time. The everyday hardship shows up fast when you look at poverty. Pontiac's poverty rate is around 25.6%. That means about 1 in 4 people are living under the poverty line. And Pontiac sits in Oakland County, which makes the contrast even sharper. County unemployment was about 3.4% in August 2025, then 4.2% in November 2025. Not catastrophic numbers, but enough to remind you that stability can be uneven, even inside a good county. Pontiac also has this chapter that tells you how deep the problems got. The city was under an emergency financial manager from 2009 to 2013. That's the era of outsourcing services and selling off assets just to keep the lights on. And right in that same time window, you get another industrial gut punch. GM's Pontiac East Assembly closed in September 2009 and was later demolished. Another big piece of Pontiac's identity, gone. So Pontiac's collapse doesn't look like one dramatic event. It looks like a city losing its big anchors, selling pieces of itself to survive and trying to rebuild while carrying a reputation it can't fully shake. The question is, does Pontiac become a smaller, steadier version of itself? Or does it keep shedding its landmarks until the only thing left is the name on the map? Number 4, Highland Park. And if you want a signature that feels like a punchline from history, this is it. Highland Park helped invent the modern car industry, and then it became famous for not being able to keep the lights on. Let's start with what this place was. In October 1913, Ford ran the first moving assembly line at the Highland Park plant. That one changed supercharged production, and the price of a Model T dropped from about $850 to $260. Think about that. This little city helped make America move faster and cheaper. Now here's what it became. Highland Park peaked at about 52,950 people in 1930. By 2020, it was down to 8,970. That's an 83% collapse. More than 4 out of 5 residents are gone. And even recently, it kept sliding. In 2010, it had 11,700 people, and by 2020, it dropped to 9,000 again, nearly a quarter lost in 1 decade. The money numbers explain why it feels so fragile. The median household income is about $27,580, and the poverty rate is about 41.2%. That's not a rough neighborhood. That's almost half the city trying to survive on fumes. And then you get the story that made national headlines because it sounded unreal. In 2011, DTE removed light bulbs from about 1,400 streetlights as part of a deal, because the city reportedly owed around $4 million for streetlight electricity. So you have the birthplace of the assembly line dealing with darkness because the bills couldn't get paid. That is Highland Park's collapse in one sentence. It doesn't stop there. Basic utilities became another choke point. In 2023, Highland Park asked the state for permission to do a quick bankruptcy, warning that without it, the city risked getting its water shut off. The debt being discussed was about $19 million to the Great Lakes Water Authority, plus interest, and other reporting described it as roughly $20 million in unpaid water bills. Imagine living in a place where the question isn't, what new project are we building, but can we keep water running? And here's a small twist that keeps this from being pure doom. People tried to patch the darkness themselves. A community group helped install 18 solar-powered streetlights to bring some light and even Wi-Fi back to parts of the city. That's not a full fix, but it tells you something. When the system breaks, the neighborhood starts improvising. Highland Park is what a collapsed town looks like when history and reality collide. A city that once changed the world, now fighting to keep the most basic stuff working. The question is, can it stabilize into a smaller, livable version of itself? Or does it keep shrinking until it's basically a hollow ring around a legendary past? Number 3, Flint. And Flint's signature isn't just that it lost jobs. Flint became the kind of city where people started asking a basic question that should never be a question in America. Can I trust what comes out of my tap? This was a giant once. Around 1960, Flint was sitting near 197,000 people. By 2020, it was down to about 81,000, which means the city lost almost 60% of its population. And it didn't just happen a long time ago. Even from 2000 to 2020, Flint fell from roughly 124,800 to 81,000, a drop of about 35% in just 20 years. That kind of shrinkage doesn't feel like a slow fade. It feels like whole chapters of the city got erased. You can see it in the housing. One study tracked Flint's vacancy rate jumping from 8.2% in 1990 to 21.1% in 2010. That's not a few empty houses. That's more than 1 out of 5 sitting vacant. And when you drive through certain neighborhoods, it hits you like a weird silence. One house looks lived in, the next is boarded, then you get a stretch that's just grass and trees, like the city is turning into an urban prairie in real time. Flint even experimented with planting white clover on vacant lots to cut mowing costs. That sounds like gardening, but it's really a city trying to manage emptiness. The money side is just as heavy. Flint's median household income is about $36,200, and the poverty rate is about 34.4%. That's more than 1 in 3 people living under the poverty line. So when things go wrong, people don't have much cushion. And the engine that used to hold everything together, it got yanked. Flint was a General Motors world for decades. At one point, GM employment in the Flint area was over 80,000 in 1978. And then it collapsed over time. You don't lose a number like that and stay the same. You become a different place. Then came the moment that stamped Flint into national memory. In 2014, the city switched its water source to the Flint River. Corrosion control wasn't handled properly, lead leached into the system, and the action level people talk about is 15 parts per billion. Here's the detail that still makes people pause. Even a GM plant reportedly stopped using the river water because it was too corrosive for parts. If the water could mess with machinery, imagine how residents felt. Flint is collapsed with 2 scars: the empty space left by lost industry and the trust that broke when the basics failed. The question now is simple and brutal. After losing people, jobs, and confidence at the same time, does Flint find a real second act? Or does it keep turning block by block into open land and memories? Number 2, Detroit. And Detroit's signature is almost too big to believe until you say it out loud. This is the Motor City, the place that powered American industry. And it also became the largest U.S. city to file for municipal bankruptcy. Start with the population gut punch. Detroit peaked around 1.8 million people in 1950. By 2023, it sat around 636,600. That's roughly a 65% loss. Like the city lost almost 2/3 of itself. And when a city shrinks that hard, it doesn't just get smaller, it gets stretched. You end up with neighborhoods that were built for full blocks of families, but now feel like the people got erased and the map forgot to adjust. The money picture tells you why the struggle sticks. In 2023, Detroit's median household income was about $39,570, and the poverty rate was about 31.5%. That's basically 1 out of every 3 people living under the poverty line. So even when you see cranes downtown, you still have to remember how many households are just trying to keep life together week to week. Then came the moment that turned Detroit into a national caution sign. The 2013 bankruptcy, with total debt figures often described around $18 to $20 billion. That's not we're behind on a few bills. That's a city hitting the emergency brake on its entire financial life. And here's the part that makes Detroit feel like a collapsed town even though it's still a major city. Detroit started demolishing Detroit to save Detroit. In 2014, the city launched the Blight demolition push, and 3,740 vacant structures came down that year alone. Imagine living in a place where the sound of progress is sometimes a wrecking ball. The scale gets even crazier when you zoom out. A final report in late 2025 described how the Detroit Land Bank Authority had about 47,000 vacant houses in 2014. Ah, boy. By the end of 2025, it was down to 942, with 240 of those still on the demolition list. That's a before and after transformation you can literally see from the air. Whole stretches that used to be dense are now open land. The famous urban prairie vibe, grass, trees, and a lonely house, standing where a neighborhood used to be. But Detroit also plays this emotional trick on you, because you can film the skyline and it still looks like a real big city. You can shoot the riverfront, the towers, the glow, and then you cut to the skeleton side. Abandoned industrial shells, empty blocks, the kind of silence that doesn't belong in a city this famous. And then you cut again to something hopeful like the restoration of Michigan Central Station, a reminder that parts of Detroit are being rebuilt even while other parts are still being cleared. Detroit is collapsed at a massive scale, with recovery happening in the same frame. The question is, does the revival spread outward into the neighborhoods, or does Detroit keep living as 2 cities at once, one rising, one quietly turning back into open land? Number 1. Calumet number 1 is Calumet, Michigan. And the weird thing is, it doesn't look collapsed at first. Downtown still has these sturdy red brick storefronts, old company buildings, and that Main Street from another century vibe. Part of the reason is the Calumet is basically a preserved boomtown now, tied into Keweenaw National Historical Park. So you walk through it and think, okay, where's the collapse? Then you hear the numbers and it hits. Back in 1900, Calumet was still known as Red Jacket, and the town had 4,668 people. Zoom out just a little and the wider Calumet Charter Township had 26,000. This place wasn't a sleepy outpost. It was a machine. Today, the core town sits around 670 people. That's roughly an 85% drop from that 1900 town number. Same streets, same brick, but the crowd is gone. And you can feel how thin the margin is in the day-to-day life. The median household income is about $25,200, and the poverty rate is about 40%. That's basically 4 out of 10 people living under the poverty line. Even the broader job picture can swing. In Houghton County, unemployment was about 5.9% in August 2025, then 4.8% in November 2025. In a place like this, that shift isn't just a stat. It's the difference between we're getting by and we're holding our breath. The reason Calumet ever existed at this scale is copper. Calumet and Hecla Mining Company was so dominant that from 1871 to 1880, it produced more than half of all the copper in the United States. That's insane to picture now, standing in a town of a few hundred people. But boomtowns don't fade gently, they snap. Calumet took a huge hit around the 1913 to 1914 Copper Country strike, and the town carries that era like a scar. There's even the Italian Hall Memorial Archway, a reminder of a community tragedy during that tense time, without needing to relive the details to feel the weight of it. And the long goodbye kept going until the industrial mothership finally shut down. CENH closed in 1968. That's Calumet's signature. It's not an empty place with nothing left. It's a place with so much left that it almost feels like a movie set. Except the population never came back to fill the frame. The question is, can a town like this turn its history into a real future, or does it stay a beautifully preserved reminder of what happens when the one big engine shuts off? Michigan's collapsed towns aren't just sad places on a map. To me, they're proof that a town can lose its future long before it loses its buildings. You can still have streets, schools, and a skyline, but if the jobs leave, the tax base thins out, and basic services start breaking, the town slowly turns into a place people pass through instead of a place they choose. What hits hardest is the pattern. The collapse usually isn't one disaster. It's years of small exits, one family at a time. If you've lived in Michigan, you probably have your own version of this story. So tell me in the comments. Which town on this list surprised you most? And which town do you think still has a real shot at coming back? If you want a part 2 or you want me to cover your hometown next, drop the name below and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it.